Exactly. Lovely to see Wolfe's team back in action again. And last time we didn't actually get to see the Shadow Rider Calyrex, but taking a look at the team here, it could very well be making an appearance, able to deal some good damage to something like the Kyogre there and deal with the Rillaboom. But Chalkey as well has a lot of good options. Having that Dark type with the Incineroar is certainly going to provide a lot of issues for Wolfe's team. You know, the Shadow Rider Calyrex doesn't want to take any Dark type moves, so Chalkey has opted to put them onto the Incineroar. And furthermore, you know, the Whimsicott, the Rillaboom, and the Zacian in particular do not want to come in the way of any of those Fire-type moves. But Wolfe is leading out with the Regieleki. Once again, happy to be here, paired up with that Rillaboom. And on Chalkey's side, it's going to be an Electric type in form of the Zapdos, paired up with the Grimmsnarl. Yeah,
and it's this very reminiscent of the match that we saw Wolfe in yesterday, where he was facing down against the Grimmsnarl and he went really hard into that slot with the fake-out support that he had in that game against Ben, just to make sure that he gets rid of the Grimmsnarl as soon as possible. So it'd be interesting to see if he goes for a similar play, fake out that slot, and then max the Regieleki and go for a big attack into that, setting the terrain up as well for that next turn to potentially go into the Zapdos.
Yeah, that's very true. Very indicative to what we saw yesterday. And if I was that Grimmsnarl, I would certainly be wondering if Wolfe was going to go for that same strategy. And it's certainly something that Wolfe wanted to get rid of previously, because setting up those screens, particularly if it is a light clay variant of that Grimmsnarl, then it's just going to be able to be so disruptive to Wolfe's offensive pressure on the field. Wolfe is going to be going for the Dynamax. I am delighted to say it is that Regieleki once more bouncing into the action and going to be applying a lot of pressure with its formidable Max Lightnings. And like you said, Lee, if that electric terrain gets set up as well, they will be even more intense in the following turns if Regieleki is still around. However, Chalkey is going to Dynamax too.
Yeah, and it's gonna be the Zapdos here, and it's a really good outlet for him, because what he can do now is start setting these airstreams up. He's got a really good target in that Rillaboom to potentially pick up a knockout here, depending on the item of the Rillaboom, but setting himself up to have that speed advantage going into the next turn, potentially. You probably won't outspeed the Regieleki depending on how Wolfe's trained his, but it gives him the opportunity to then get another airstream off the following turn and then get the support for whatever comes in next to.
Exactly, and we do see the fake out go down into the Grimmsnarl, but the Max Lightning does not follow up into that slot, instead targeting down that Zapdos and doing a huge amount of damage while also critically setting up that electric terrain. Life Orb recall obviously happening as as the Max Airstream comes out from the Zapdos into the opposing Rillaboom and just removes it from the field. So no more Rillaboom to contend with, and that will certainly give, if Chalkey has that Kyogre in the background, give it a little sigh of relief.
Yeah, and the Rillaboom going down is huge for the Kyogre in the late game, of course, if Chalkey has brought that, which you would assume he has done. The thing now is that Chalkey's going to be able to utilize the Grimmsnarl to at least get some screen support on the field, if that is what he's opting for, you know. So he could go for a light screen here, or even a Reflect if he's more worried about the Zacian. But the more immediate threat is obviously going to be the Regieleki. It's got that electric train support, and it's still currently going to be the fastest thing on the field.
Well, that's the thing, is Zacian can just do significant damage to the Grimmsnarl with something like the Behemoth Blade, but Grimmsnarl's forced in this situation to choose, do you want to boost up the defense or the special defense of your team here? Because Grimmsnarl can be KO'd, so maybe it only has the opportunity to set up one, and if you go for the light screen, you're going to be protecting from the Regieleki a little bit going forward, but then at the same time, Zacian's going to be in full force. Zapdos as well, on really dwindled HP, isn't going to be able to survive a Null and Max Lightning, even if the light screen is in play.
Yeah, and that's the problem, I think, here. You're probably forcing into a Max Guard, or kind of letting the Zapdos go down here. We do see the light screen come out. It's going to give a bit of support against the Regieleki, but you've got to remember that that electric terrain is set up now, so it's just boosting it even further. And not opting to go for the Zapdos, just going into the Grimmsnarl and removing it even behind that light screen.
Yeah, you can see the power of those Max Lightnings. And of course, Zapdos going to fire off a Max Lightning in return. Got the speed boost up from that Max Airstream previously. Not going to be able to pick up the KO against the Zacian, of course, but does do about 50%. Zacian, however, had enough HP remaining to set up that substitute, putting Wolfe into a good position going forward. And of course, the light screen, I do understand that played by Chalkey, because obviously Wolfe's other restricted pair there is the Shadow Rider Calyrex, a very big known special attacker. So to have that up could provide Chalkey a little bit more support later on in the match.
Yeah, and it's the Zacian coming in for Chalkey now is a nice option. Obviously, it's very heavily threatened by this Regieleki. So you've got the light screen support, of course, which does give you a little bit of a kind of buffer here. But again, you saw how much damage it's just done to the Grimmsnarl, and you know, Grimmsnarl generally quite defensively built anyway. So Zacian got to be careful here to get through this last turn of the Dynamax, especially with the Regieleki. But no protects coming out, Lou, and the Max Lightning coming into that slot.
Oh, and it absolutely destroys the Zacian with a critical hit. This Regieleki is unstoppable at the moment. Manages to pick up that very solid KO as Zapdos goes for another max airstream here. Down into that Zacian substitute doll, but critically getting up, obviously, the speed and doing a little bit of damage to the substitute, enough to break it through, leaving the Zacian exposed. But that critical hit was magnificent from the Regieleki, just removing that restricted and one that could apply a lot of pressure going forward. Zacian on Wolf's side going to be able to finish up the Zapdos with a Behemoth Blade.
Yeah, and this is really unfortunate for Chalkey because it's probably looking like the Kyogre is going to be in the back, and against the Regieleki with its terrain on the field, even with the light screen up, it's not going to be any match for the remaining Pokemon Wolf side of the field. I think if you're Chalkey, you're probably looking at trying to get another Airstream up before this turn, so you could Airstream and get the speed boost onto Zacian, who could then threaten the Regieleki, but without that additional kind of speed control support from the Zapdos, then you're kind of stuck in that position where Zacian is always going to be susceptible to getting attacked from the Regieleki.
Yeah, and it's certainly unfortunate there for Chalkey, because if the Zacian had been, you know, KO'd in that turn, it could have gone for the Behemoth Blade into that Regieleki. Behemoth Blade going to the Dynamax Pokemon, obviously doubles in its base power, would have been very, very destructive and likely picked up that KO nice and easy against Regieleki. As powerful as it is, it's not the most defensive of Pokemon, and that could have really given Kyogre a bit of a better positioning here, because Chalkey would have been able to get rid of the Rillaboom and the Regieleki. But as you can see, Regieleki able to pick up a solid one-hit KO against that Kyogre, meaning Wolf Glick is going to take a very fast and commanding game one.
Yeah, the critical hit probably quite important there, I think, because the Zacian, like you say, probably would have just kind of held on, which would have given Kyogre a little bit more freedom when it actually hit the field. But of course, without any sort of support against the Regieleki, the Kyogre is just kind of a sitting duck in that situation.
Exactly.
Really unfortunate. So a lot of information, I think, from Chalkey's side, how to better approach that matchup, because I think the Regieleki is such a threat. You need to kind of approach a way to better deal with it, and it's all about that speed control. I think the methods of speed control that we've seen so far in the Max Airstream. Does Grimmsnarl have an option of maybe Scary Face that he could utilize? Because that would definitely give him a little bit of an advantage if that is an option, but we're yet to see what other options that Grimmsnarl has.
I mean, I know you're not sorry to see the Regieleki do so tremendously well, but if you're Chalkey in this situation, you have to think, how do I stop it from absolutely running through my team? And if you take a look at Chalkey's 6 Pokemon, there is not a ground type amongst them, so there's nothing that can switch in to take, obviously, no damage. So if you're Chalkey, you need a way to be able to try and combat against this Regieleki. Possibly, you know, something like the Rillaboom can have the utility with the grassy terrain, the priority grassy glide maybe will be able to deal enough damage to that Regieleki to stop it being such a formidable threat. But it's quite difficult. Wolf again has Pokemon that's going to be able to deal with that Rillaboom in the form of the Incineroar, and of course the Zacian as well can deal out a huge amount of damage. I did like the addition of the Zapdos though. I did think going for the Max Airstreams was good to gain that speed control very early on in the match. Just unfortunately Regieleki was so powerful. Yeah,
and one of the things that's interesting that you mentioned the Rillaboom, it's not generally something that you would maybe consider being your max Pokemon, but the different options that the Rillaboom can have, it could potentially be a really good max option, because once you max it, you're obviously, you know, resisting the electric type attacks anyway, and you can throw out huge damaging attacks with that grassy terrain support as well. So that is an option that you could maybe go down. If you've got something like high horsepower as well, you've got the access to max Quake, you can hit things like Zacian for good damage, the Incineroar, and you've got your own Intimidate support as well with Chalkey's Incineroar to kind of help neuter those physical attackers that would be probably a little bit more problematic than the other Pokemon on Wolf's team.
Well, let's see how Chalkey's going to be able to adapt going into this game 2, whether the Kyogre's threats can be eliminated successfully. Regieleki and Incineroar coming out for Wolfe. Regieleki staying to hang out with us all, but a switch of Fake Out user in form of the Incineroar. Chalkey sticking with Grimmsnarl and the Zapdos. Yeah,
the same lead for Chalkey here. He must have an idea about how he wants to kind of go into this game, maybe a little bit differently from the first time. He's got to expect the Fake Out again onto his Grimmsnarl from that Incineroar. We're yet to see anything other than Light Screen, though, on the Grimmsnarl. So, you know, there is a possibility Grimmsnarl gets Fake Out of its own, so you could maybe catch out the Incineroar. The thing doing that is, though, you're still not really getting any value out of the Grimmsnarl by doing that. But we are going to just see a switch straight away from the Zapdos into that Rillaboom.
Yeah, Rillaboom coming into the fray. Zapdos not wanting to take one of those Big Max Lightnings like it did in Game 1 from the opposing Regieleki. And Rillaboom taking control of this terrain, having the grassy terrain available and the Fake Out in the next turn will, you know, be able to possibly stop the Incineroar from going for anything. And at least it's got onto the field unintimidated as well. Wolfe, however, once again showcasing the fabulous Regieleki with the Dynamax and applying a tremendous amount of pressure onto Chalkey here. We don't know if we're going to see that kind of Fake Out Max Lightning combination to get rid of the Grimmsnarl again. Although Grimmsnarl didn't give Wolfe a lot of difficulty in that Game 1, it certainly is a Pokemon that can be pesky for his team, so I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to eliminate it early on here. Goes into the Grimmsnarl with that Fake Out. Regieleki goes for the Max Lightning, and it is doubling up into that Grimmsnarl. Is going to be enough to remove it from the field, so Wolfe does not have to worry about any light screens or reflects going forward in this game too.
Yeah, and just like we've seen on the stream yesterday, how Wolfe effectively deals with this sort of threat in the Grimmsnarl because of the screen support that it offers, and he wants to just eliminate that. He did that yesterday, going for the Fake Out, the attack into it, removing it from the field. And the thing is now that the grassy terrain's not in effect, you've got also the added bonus of you've got your electric terrain on the field, which is not ideal if you're facing down against Regieleki. And now we see the Kyogre come into the field very threatened, obviously in front of this Regieleki.
That's the thing, the Kyogre's out on the field now facing down against Regieleki in its max form, looking so formidable. If you're Chalkey here, you need to make sure that you are protecting it well. It could be the possibility that it could switch out, bring that Zapdos back in, just maybe to kind of have to sacrifice itself, take a big amount of damage to protect that Kyogre, leaving Rillaboom free to maybe try and deal with that Regieleki going forward. Chalkey, of course, still does have access to their Dynamax move, so depending on the option here, you mentioned a little bit in kind of the gap between Games 1 and Game 2 that Rillaboom could be a Dynamax option here in order to just deal with this Regieleki.
Well, it's probably the best option that he's got right in front of him right now, because typically you don't want to max your Kyogre because it will just go down to whatever the Regieleki throws out at it. And Rillaboom really going to give you the best option to get damage onto the Regieleki, which is kind of the main aim for Chalkey now, is to get rid of the Regieleki as quickly as possible and kind of free up the other Pokemon that he's got to use, in being in the Zapdos and that Kyogre.
Well, some hard switches coming out from both of our Pokemon trainers here. Wolfe bringing the Zacian onto the field. And I like this position because if you're Wolfe, you're going to think, hey, Chalkey's going to Dynamax at some point very soon. Let me get my Zacian onto the field. Chalkey doesn't have the speed control utility that was available in Game 1, so Zacian's going to be in a great position to pressure the Dynamax Pokemon with the Behemoth Blade. You can see it's actually going to be the Dynamax Kyogre, really, really brave in front of this Regieleki that is going for the Max Lightning in the electric terrain into the Dynamax Kyogre. Oh, gosh.
Survives.
Oh, amazing. Not enough to pick up the one-hit KO. That extra HP really coming in clutch, allowing this Kyogre to fire off a powerful Max Geyser into the Zacian that has switched on and get a one-hit KO.
That is the play if you're going to make a play, and massive props to Chalkey for doing that, because you know that the Kyogre, the big threat in front of it, is that Regieleki. But being able, having that big special defense stat that it has, able to take that and not opting to go for the Regieleki, because I think what you can do is, when you think about it, Chalkey's got the Rillaboom in the back, so you can bring it in, and as long as the grassy terrain's on the field, you can grassy glide into it and do a significant chunk of damage. Obviously there is the immediate threat that the Regieleki's still posing on to the Kyogre right now, but you do have access to Max Guard this turn. You've just got to be wary about your Zapdos being targeted. Even though Zapdos probably has Hurricane, it can go for the Rillaboom, but you've got to be aware of that Fake Out that's pressuring from Wolfe's side of the field as well.
Oh, 100%. This Rillaboom is pressuring in many ways, shapes and forms. Like you said, you mentioned the Fake Out going down into that Zapdos, but if you're the Kyogre, the two Pokemon you do not want to see on Wolfe's team are the Regieleki and the Rillaboom, and you're facing down against both of them in this situation. So I'm not surprised to see it scarpering here back into its Pokeball, and an interesting choice to go for the switcher, and I think it is the right call. That Kyogre is not going to be around for long, and if you get your Rillaboom onto the field, you can apply a little bit of pressure while that grassy terrain is in effect, and of course it can take that grassy glide much better than the Kyogre would have done. Max Lightning comes out again though from this Regieleki into the Zapdos, picks up a solid one-hit KO against it, even without the electric terrain in force. It's now back, of course, due to that Max Lightning, and Regieleki once again just being the absolute standout hero of this match, taking KOs left, right and centre. Yeah,
it's really difficult for Chalkey because it just doesn't have the resist to the electric type attacks, and with something so fast like Regieleki, it's hard to position yourself against it. And now that play made sense because you're expecting the Max Lightning to come into the Kyogre slot, but Wolfe expecting either a Max Guard or a switch there and going after the Zapdos, where you feel more comfortable to pick up a knockout. And by doing that as well, if the Rillaboom comes in like we've just seen, the grassy terrain is overwritten, and now both Rillabooms on the field, and we do see the forfeit there, and Wolfe is going to take the match.
Well, huge congratulations to both of our players, and also to that Regieleki that I really think was the standout there for